Professor Aldrich stood before the class like a man performing on a stage, polished shoes, tightened jaw, and the kind of confidence that bordered on theatrical arrogance. He tapped the chalk against the board and said, "Solve this, and I'll marry you. I'm serious. Anyone who solves it deserves my hand and all my respect." The class erupted in laughter, some amused, others embarrassed by the absurdity. No one tried. No one even stepped forward. It was just another one of his jokes that made gifted students feel small. Eli, still sweeping near the doorway, lifted his gaze again. He didn't understand why, but the symbols whispered something familiar. Remnants of a world he once lived in, a world he'd walked away from long before he held a mop. A girl in the front row, Ava, raised her hand timidly. "Sir, is that even solvable?" Aldrich smirked. "To someone truly capable? Yes. To everyone else? Just decoration on the board." Students exchanged glances. Aldrich enjoyed these moments, standing above them, reinforcing the invisible line between genius and ordinary minds. Eli's hand tightened on the mop handle. He didn't resent the professor, but he remembered that look. He'd seen it before in colleagues and rivals, in people who once stood beside him in places where equations were poetry and brilliance was currency. He swallowed the memory and kept cleaning. A sudden commotion broke the tension. Ava dropped her notebook. Paper scattered across the floor. Without hesitation, Eli bent to help her gather them. "Oh no, you don't need to," she began. "It's all right," he replied softly, handing her the pages. His fingers brushed a sheet filled with scribbled equations, complex ones with depth. She noticed his eyes catch on them. "You understand this?" she whispered. Eli blinked, as if her question pulled him from somewhere far away. "Maybe a little." She smiled, faint but warm. For a moment, she saw him, really saw him. Not the uniform, not the mop, but the mind behind the quiet. "Thank you," she said. Aldrich looked over, irritated that his performance was interrupted. "Turner, you're here to clean, not tutor. Move along." Eli nodded, stepping back, but the dismissive tone stung the air. Some students glanced away, uncomfortable. Others simply ignored it, but Ava didn't. Something in her tightened. Indignation mixed with curiosity. Who was this man behind the mop? Class resumed, the professor continuing his lecture with his usual elaborate gestures. But Eli kept his eyes low, his thoughts swirling. He shouldn't get involved. He should finish cleaning and move to the next hallway. Yet the equation on the board kept tugging at him. As the lecture ended, Aldrich addressed the class again. "The challenge stands. Anyone who solves it, marriage, fame, the works. Though I doubt any of you will even attempt it." He chuckled as if amused by his own superiority. Students filed out, some laughing, some shaking their heads. Ava lingered. "Sir, why a marriage proposal?" "It grabs attention," he shrugged. "Besides, it's harmless fun." She didn't agree, but she didn't argue. As they left the hall, Eli approached the board. Alone now. The silence felt heavier, the chalk lines almost glowing. His fingertips hovered above the symbols. His breath slowed. Memories pressed in. A research lab, conference rooms, applause, papers with his name on them, and then grief, collapse, and the choice to disappear from that world entirely. He exhaled. Then, because he couldn't help it, he lifted the chalk. A soft squeak echoed to the empty hall as he wrote the first line of a solution. He froze when he heard footsteps behind him. Ava had returned for her water bottle, now watching with wide eyes as he filled the board with elegant, precise steps no student had dared to write. "Mr. Turner, how are you doing that?" she whispered. Eli paused, chalk trembling slightly. "Old habits." She stepped closer, replacing confusion. "You should show him," she said. "You should show the professor." Eli shook his head immediately. "No, this isn't my place." "Maybe it is." Her voice held something gentle, belief, not pressure, and it touched something in him, something long buried. If you were standing there in that empty hall, watching a man the world overlook reveal a spark of brilliance, what would you have done? Be honest. Type your answer below. And if words don't come easily, just tap like to say compassion still matters. Eli wiped part of the solution before anyone else arrived, leaving only hints of brilliance behind. Then he placed the chalk down and whispered, almost to himself, "Some equations aren't meant to be solved twice." He turned to leave, unaware that the moment he stepped into the hallway, fate had already begun shifting around him. Ava stared at the board, then at the fading silhouette of the man who had just rewritten everything she thought she knew about him. Ava stood there long after Eli disappeared around the corner, her gaze glued to the half-erased symbols. Even incomplete, they pulsed with a quiet intelligence she couldn't fully grasp. She whispered to herself, "How does a janitor solve what the smartest students won't even attempt?" When she finally left the hall, her steps carried a new purpose. The campus bustled with noise, friends linking arms, students complaining about exams, someone laughing too loudly near the vending machines. Yet her mind stayed trapped in that moment, the chalk dancing between Eli's fingers, as if guided by instinct rather than effort. Ava spotted him later near the West Building, kneeling by a broken coffee machine as he wiped spilled foam from the tiles. Something in her chest tightened, not pity, but a strange mix of respect and worry, like she was seeing someone living below their destiny. "Mr. Turner," she called gently. He looked up, startled. "Ava, everything okay?" "You didn't have to erase it." His eyes dropped to the cloth in his hand. "I did." "Why?" she pressed. He hesitated, then whispered, "Sometimes it's safer to stay invisible." She didn't like that answer. Something about it felt too heavy, too practiced, as if invisibility was a shield he'd carried for years. "You're not invisible," she murmured. Eli smiled faintly, but only in the way people smile, when they don't believe the words meant to comfort them. He tossed the cloth into his bucket and rose to his feet. "Don't tell anyone what you saw," he said. "Not yet." "Is someone after you?" She joked softly, but the flicker of pain in his eyes was no joke at all. He adjusted his gloves. "No, just let things stay simple." Ava watched him leave, her heart unsettled. She didn't know it yet, but this was the moment she chose to stand on his side, long before the world forced him into the spotlight. Later that afternoon, the rumor started, not from Ava. She kept her promise. Instead, two boys who returned early to retrieve a forgotten jacket noticed the faint traces of chalk still on the board. One of them, Leo, snapped a picture and zoomed in. "Bro, someone started solving it. Look at the steps." "No way. Aldridge will freak." By lunchtime, whispers spread like wildfire. Someone solved part of it. Someone brilliant. Someone anonymous. Aldridge didn't like anonymous. The professor stormed into hall just before his next lecture, eyes sharp, scanning every student. "Who touched my board?" Silence. Ava's heartbeat hammered. "Whoever did this," he continued, "has no understanding of the depth of the problem. Some steps are correct, but the logic is incomplete. Arrogant, really." Ava clenched her jaw. She wanted to defend Eli, but she didn't even know how, not without exposing him. Aldridge sighed dramatically. Children trying to wear crowns they haven't earned. That was too much. Ava raised her hand. "Sir, what if the person is a student? What if there's someone who already earned a crown and just didn't want to wear it?" The class murmured. Aldridge frowned. "Meaning?" She swallowed. "Meaning intelligence doesn't come with a degree or a title." Aldridge chuckled, the kind that cut through the room like a blade. "You've been reading too many inspirational quotes." But Ava didn't feel embarrassed. She felt angry. After class, she left quickly, the weight of unspoken truth pressing on her shoulders. She wished she could tell Eli that she believed in him, but she didn't even know where he went after his shift. She searched the campus until she found him outside under an oak tree, repairing a loose bench plank with quiet precision. Students walked past without seeing him. Ava walked straight toward him. "You're allowed to exist big, you know," she said softly. "You don't have to shrink." Eli paused, the screwdriver in his hand frozen mid-turn. He inhaled shakily. "Some people break when they live big. I did." There it was, the fracture line. Ava sat beside him without asking. "Then maybe you're allowed to heal big too." His breath caught in his throat, not from her words, but from the sincerity behind them. He hadn't felt seen in years. She reached into her bag and pulled out her notebook. Here, this is my number. Call me if you ever need someone to talk to. He stared at the tiny slip of paper, like it was something fragile. Ava, thank you, but I don't want my story to burden anyone. It won't. Stories don't burden, they connect. Have you ever had someone step into your life at the exact moment you needed them? Even if you didn't ask? If yes, write yes and drop their name. Maybe gratitude can travel further than we think. Eli placed the paper gently in his pocket, but a shadow crossed his eyes. He hadn't told her the truth, the real reason he hid, the real reason he stayed small. He was once a man everyone knew, a prodigy, a scholar, a rising star in mathematics, and also a brother who failed to save the one person he loved most. Ava didn't know that yet, but she would, sooner than either of them expected. Eli finished tightening the last screw on the bench, the metal groaning softly as it settled into place. The campus lights were beginning to flicker on, casting a warm golden hue over the courtyard. Students drifted by with laughter and late-night coffee cups. But Eli remained still for a moment, hands resting quietly on the wooden plank he had repaired. Ava watched him with gentle patience. She didn't push. She didn't pry. She simply existed beside him, and somehow that alone softened the air. "You fixed this whole thing in 5 minutes," she murmured. 5 minutes and a few decades of practice, he replied with a wry smile. She caught the sadness beneath it. Practice and benches? He shook his head lightly. In fixing things people sit on without noticing. Then, after a pause, he added, and in fixing things they notice too late. A breeze swept between them, stirring the leaves overhead. Ava leaned forward slightly. Eli, what happened? I mean, if it's okay to ask. Not yet, he said quietly, but soon. Their conversation might have continued, if not for the sudden, sharp voice from across the courtyard. There you are. Professor Aldridge approached with brisk, irritated steps, his hands stuffed into the pockets of his coat. He looked like a man on a mission fueled by bruised pride. Ava tensed instantly. Eli straightened, polite but guarded. Professor? Aldridge stopped a few feet away, eyeing him like a puzzle piece that didn't belong in the picture. Someone tampered with my chalkboard, started writing nonsense on a complex equation. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you? Eli held his gaze calmly. Why would I? Aldridge scoffed. Exactly. Why would you? The words dripped disdain. Ava stepped forward. Sir, that's uncalled for. The professor lifted a brow, amused by her boldness. Miss Hartley, you're bright. Don't waste your breath defending someone who sweeps floors for a living. Eli lowered his eyes, absorbing the sting like an old wound reopened. But Ava didn't let the moment slide. Respect isn't tied to job titles, she said sharply. Aldridge's smile thinned. He turned his attention back to Eli. The steps on the board. Whoever wrote them doesn't understand mathematical integrity. They copied fragments without comprehension. Eli's jaw tightened imperceptibly. Ava saw it. She saw everything. The professor continued. Anyway, if you see any student near that board again, let me know. Some people don't know their place. Eli stayed silent, but silence was a battlefield of its own. Aldridge left as abruptly as he arrived, shoes tapping like hammers against concrete. Ava exhaled shakily. I'm sorry. He shouldn't speak to you like that. It's all right, Eli murmured. No, it's not. Eli gathered his tools and placed them back in his maintenance bag. His hands were steady, but something inside him wavered. He's not wrong, Eli said quietly. Ava turned to him, stunned. Eli, I do sweep floors, he said. I do stay out of sight. I do keep my place. Only because you chose the smallest corner of your life and forced yourself to fit inside it, she whispered. His throat tightened. He didn't know how she always managed to say the thing that broke him open. They started walking toward the East Garden, the quietest park campus. Street lamps flickered above, bathing the path in soft light. Leaves rustled under their steps, the night settling gently around them. Ava glanced at him. When he said the steps were wrong, were they? Eli gave a faint, humorless smile. No, they were right. Then why erase them? Another long silence. Because being right, he said, ruined my life once. Her breath caught. He stopped walking, standing beneath a lamp that cast a halo above him. For the first time, Ava saw the exhaustion he hid. The weight, the memories, the quiet grief etched in the corners of his smile. "My brother," he whispered, voice trembling just slightly. He looked up to me, wanted to follow my path. I pushed him too hard, pushed myself too hard, and when he broke, I didn't see it in time. Ava stepped closer, every instinct urging her to reach out. "I lost him," Eli said, eyes glassy but steady. "And losing him made everything else, the awards, the research, the praise, feel like poison. So I walked away." The night felt still, as if listening. "Ava, solving equations doesn't matter if the people you love slip through your fingers while you're busy being brilliant." Her heart ached for him, deeply, fiercely. She whispered, "Eli, you didn't kill your brother." But he didn't answer. His silence said he didn't believe that. Not yet. And maybe not ever. "Now it's your turn. Share one small good thing you've done recently, even if it felt insignificant. Write it below so others remember that kindness still lives. Your moment might be the light someone needs tonight." Eli wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, trying to compose himself. Ava stayed beside him. No judgment, no pressure, just presence. Quiet, warm presence. He inhaled shakily. "I'm not the man I used to be." Ava looked at him with certainty. "Maybe you're the man you were meant to become." He didn't know it, but those words would be the spark that pushed him toward the moment that would change everything. The moment when the world would see him, whether he wanted them to or not. Eli and Ava stood beneath the lamplit trees, until the night grew thicker around them. Students passed occasionally, wrapped in jackets and late-night conversations. But the world felt strangely small in that moment. Just the two of them, and the truth finally unburied. Eli cleared his throat softly. "I shouldn't have told you all that." "I'm glad you did." Ava brushed a leaf from her sweater. "You've been carrying something no one should carry alone." He shook his head. "It doesn't change anything." "It changes everything," she whispered. But Eli didn't reply. He stepped away slightly, letting the cool night air settle the tremor in his chest. He had spent years burying his past, convincing himself he deserved to fade quietly into the background. But now, Ava's kindness made the hiding feel suffocating. Before either of them could speak again, voices echoed from a nearby walkway. "Dude, check this out." Two students rushed toward the mathematics building entrance, one holding out a phone screen glowing brightly in the dark. Ava and Eli exchanged a glance, then followed at a slow distance, curiosity tugging at both of them. Inside the hall, the whispers rose into full-blown excitement. Someone had posted the chalkboard image, the partial solution Eli had unintentionally left behind. The caption read, "Who did this? Professor says steps are advanced. No student claims it." Rumor had turned into wildfire. A crowd gathered around the board now, staring, analyzing, snapping photos. Even students who normally avoided anything mathematical stood there, mesmerized. Ava tensed. "Eli, they're going to figure it out." "No," Eli murmured. "They won't. They're looking for a prodigy, not a janitor." A strange emptiness flickered across his eyes, the kind born from being overlooked too many times. But fate didn't care about hiding places. It had teeth, and tonight it chose to bite. Professor Aldrich stormed into the room, his expression twisted in a mix of irritation and ego-driven excitement. "Move aside," he barked, pushing through the students. He stared at the board, really stared. His jaw twitched. "These steps," he muttered. "This isn't a joke." Someone with real understanding touched this board. A murmur rippled across the room. "Who was in here after class?" Aldrich demanded. A student pointed at the faint mop-swirled floor. "Janitor cleaned right after we left." Aldrich's expression darkened. He spun sharply, eyes scanning the room until they landed on Eli standing near the back wall. "You." The words sliced through the hall. Ava stepped instinctively in front of Eli, but Aldrich raised a hand. "Miss Hartley, move." She didn't. "Sir, you're making an assumption." "No," he snapped. "I am asking question." Aldrich's gaze pinned Eli. "Did you write on my board?" Eli lifted his eyes, calm but weary. I shouldn't have. Whispers exploded instantly. He admitted it? Wait, did the janitor really saw that? No way. Is he like some retired genius or something? Aldridge took a step closer. You? You expect me to believe you understand this problem? Eli didn't flinch. I didn't say I understood all of it. Ava's breath caught. She saw the lie in his eyes. He understood every line. The professor laughed under his breath, shaking his head. This is unbelievable. You're telling me you, a man who mops floors, managed even a fraction of this? Eli didn't respond. So you're claiming credit for something you don't comprehend? I'm not claiming anything. Aldridge scoffed. Then why touch it? Eli swallowed. Because it reminded me of something I used to love. Something shifted in Aldridge's expression. Not empathy, but bitterness. You know, Aldridge said, voice low and cutting, mocking mathematics is one thing. Pretending to belong to a world far above you is another. A hush fell. Ava's eyes burned with anger. Sir, that's... But Aldridge didn't let her finish. This board is the heart of my work, he snapped. Not a playground for the custodial staff. Eli stepped back slightly as if struck. His silence was louder than shouting. Ava's hands curled into fists. You're wrong, Professor. About him. About everything. Aldridge ignored her and turned back to class. Get out, all of you. I need the room. This nonsense has gone on long enough. As the students slowly dispersed, Ava remained by Eli's side. He stood still, staring at the ground, shame and memory blending into something raw. He whispered, I told you I break things. No, Ava said fiercely. He broke you, not the other way around. Her voice cracked with emotion. She placed a hand on Eli's arm. For a moment, he didn't move. Then, slowly, he lifted his gaze, and she saw the storm inside him, the guilt, the brilliance, the fractured hope. If that moment hit you in the heart, the humiliation, the pain, the quiet strength, leave a red heart. Sometimes one small symbol speaks what our voices can't manage to say. Ava drew a slow breath and said softly, this isn't over. Not by a long shot. Eli didn't answer, because deep down he feared she was right, and that terrified him more than anything. The hallway outside the lecture room felt too bright, too exposed, as if every fluorescent light was pointed directly at Eli. Students lingered near lockers, whispering behind hands, glancing his way in quick, uncertain looks. Ava walked beside him with determined steps, her shoulder almost touching his, a deliberate signal that he wasn't alone. But Eli's breathing had gone shallow, barely noticeable unless one looked closely. He wasn't afraid of being found out. He was afraid of being seen again. They stepped outside into the cool night air. Most of campus had quieted by now. The sky above dotted with faint stars peeking between passing clouds. Still, Eli kept walking until they reached the old fountain near the Humanities building, a spot usually deserted at this hour. He sat on its edge slowly, elbows resting on his knees, hands loosely clasped. Ava sat beside him, waiting, not speaking, not pushing. Finally, he whispered, I shouldn't have written anything. You didn't do anything wrong, she replied gently. I crossed a line. No, you only crossed a line. He wanted you to stay behind. Eli stared at the rippling water in the fountain. A few fallen leaves floated on the surface, turning slowly under the moonlight. My life was quiet, he said. Simple, predictable. That's how I kept the memories from drowning me. Ava's eyes softened. Eli, when I walked away from my old world, he continued, voice barely above a breath, I told myself I was doing the right thing. That leaving made everything safer. That leaving meant I couldn't hurt anyone again. She listened without interrupting. But today, his voice cracked. Today, for the first time in years, I felt something old waking up inside me, and it scared me. What scared you? That I didn't hate it. He swallowed hard. That part of me missed it. A faint tremor ran through his hands. Ava reached out slowly, turning his hand palm up. His fingers were rough from cleaning chemicals, tiny scars tracing his skin, but they trembled with vulnerability he rarely allowed to surface. You're not wrong for missing a part of yourself. Ava said softly. He closed his eyes. But it destroyed me once. That's because no one stood with you back then, she whispered. Something about that sentence unraveled him. A single tear slid down his cheek before he could stop it. Ava didn't point out. She simply squeezed his hand lightly, a silent promise that she wasn't going anywhere. After a long, quiet moment, Eli lifted his head, gazing up at the old campus clock tower. Aldridge won't let this go. He shouldn't, because he's about to find out how wrong he is. Eli gave a weak smile. You think I should tell him? I think, she said gently, that hiding doesn't heal wounds. He exhaled slowly. You sound like my brother. Ava's voice softened. Tell me about him. Eli stared at the water again, watching the moon's reflection ripple. His name was Daniel, he said. He was brighter than I ever was. Curious about everything. He used to stay up with me while I worked on proofs, even when he didn't understand them. He said the chalk dust made me look like I belonged to another world. A faint, aching smile touched his lips. He wanted to be like me, and I pushed him too hard. I didn't see the signs. I didn't see how much pressure he was under. Ava's hand tightened around his. He wasn't built for that world, Eli whispered, and I didn't protect him. I was too blinded by ambition. Pain flickered through his voice, not anger, but the hollow ache of irreversible loss. Ava leaned closer. Eli, one person can't carry someone else's whole life. But I did, he said, and when he collapsed, I was too far inside my own mind to catch him. Silence stretched, thick and heavy. Ava blinked away tears she didn't expect. You loved him. That matters more than anything. He shook his head. I wasn't there when it mattered. She whispered, he wouldn't want you to punish yourself forever. Eli didn't speak. The wound was too old, too deep, but Ava's words reached a place inside him that had been untouched for years. Be honest. Could you forgive after what they did? Could you look at someone's deepest mistake and still see their heart beneath it? Type forgive if you believe healing is possible, or never if the pain feels too heavy to let go. Eli wiped his face with the sleeve of his uniform, breathing unevenly. I lost everything after that, he said slowly. I stopped teaching, stopped researching, stopped being someone. You didn't stop, Ava murmured. You survived. He looked at her, really looked, and for the first time, something like hope flickered in his expression. But the moment was short-lived. Footsteps echoed behind them. A security guard approached, breathless. Eli, there's a problem. Eli stood quickly. What happened? It's Professor Aldridge, the guard said. He's demanding you come to the math building right now. He's furious. Ava's jaw clenched. Of course he is. The guard lowered his voice. He thinks you're hiding something. And honestly, the whole department is talking. Eli felt his stomach twist. Ava stepped closer to him. You don't have to face him alone. Eli took a shaky breath. He didn't know it yet, but what waited in that building wasn't an accusation. It was the beginning of the storm that would drag his entire past back into the light. The walk back to the mathematics building felt like crossing a bridge into old ghosts. The night air, once calming, now clung to Eli's skin like a warning. Ava stayed beside him, matching every step. Her presence the only steady thing in the storm gathering around them. Lights inside the building glowed harshly through the tall glass windows. Shadows moved within, more than one. Eli slowed down when he noticed the silhouettes lined up near the chalkboard. Ava whispered, looks like half the department is here. She wasn't exaggerating. As they entered the hall, Eli saw at least 6 professors standing around the board, murmuring with tight expressions. Students hovered near the doorways, pretending to study while their eyes flicked toward the scene. At the center of it all stood Professor Aldridge, arms crossed, pacing like a man preparing for a battle he fully intended to win. The moment Eli stepped in, Aldridge's head snapped up. There he is, he said coldly. A hush fell over the room. Eli stopped a few steps inside. You wanted to see me? Aldridge gestured toward the board. The half-array solution, the one Eli thought he had hidden, had been carefully redrawn from photos students had posted. But now, next to it, another set of equations had been added, corrections, speculations, attempts to see where it led. The department was clearly torn between curiosity and disbelief. One professor, Dr. Molina, adjusted her glasses. "Mr. Turner, did you write these steps?" Eli's throat tightened. Ava stood close, ready to speak if he faltered. "Yes," he said quietly. Aldridge let out a humorless laugh. "You expect us to believe that?" Another professor, older and kinder-looking, stepped closer. "Could you explain your reasoning?" Eli hesitated, not because he couldn't, but because explaining meant admitting he still remembered how to speak that language. Ava whispered, "You can do this." He took a slow breath and approached the board. The room went impossibly still as he lifted the chalk. He pointed to the first line. "I started here because the standard approach is too slow. So I use a transformation method our department hasn't adopted yet." A professor blinked. "And where did you learn that?" "Years ago," Eli replied subtly. He moved to the second line. "This adjustment corrects for the variable collapse." Then the third, and the fourth, and the fifth. With every explanation he gave, the room shifted. At first disbelief, then confusion, then a creeping realization. Eli wasn't guessing. He wasn't bluffing. He understood the problem at a depth none of them expected. Aldridge's smirk slowly faded. By the time Eli stepped back, chalk dust on his fingers, the silence in the room felt heavier than any lecture hall could bear. Dr. Molina spoke first. "Mr. Turner, this work is an amateur." Then the older professor added, "This is the kind of thinking we see at mathematical symposiums. Advanced ones." A student from the doorway whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Is he like some retired genius?" A ripple of murmurs followed. Eli lowered his gaze. "I'm not here to impress anyone. I just missed the feel of an equation once." Aldridge stepped forward, face tight with something between anger and fear. "Who are you?" Eli didn't answer. Ava stepped in. "He's someone you dismissed without ever knowing him." Aldridge ignored her completely. "This isn't just cleverness," he snapped. "These steps remind me of someone else's work. Someone who vanished years ago." Eli's breath caught. Aldridge narrowed his eyes. Elias Turner, theoretical mathematician, published at 23. Last seen at a conference before disappearing completely. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Ava froze. "Eli, is that you?" Eli didn't move. Aldridge smirked coldly, like a hunter who cornered his prey. "So? Did the prodigy finally crawl out from whatever hole he hid in?" Eli's voice was barely a whisper. "I didn't crawl out. You dragged me." "No," Aldridge said, stepping closer. "Your guilt dragged you. Your failure dragged you." Ava stepped between them instantly. "Enough." But Aldridge wasn't finished. His voice sharpened. "You abandoned your field. The world thought you were dead." Eli flinched. Ava's heart broke at the sight. He whispered, "Maybe I was." The professors looked shaken, not by the revelation, but by the man standing before them, raw and fragile, exposed under too many eyes. Aldridge opened his mouth again, but Dr. Molina cut him off sharply. "That's enough, Aldridge. He's a human being, not a cautionary tale for your ego." Aldridge recoiled at her tone. Eli looked around the room, at the faces full of shock, confusion, judgment, curiosity, and his chest constricted. He wasn't supposed to be here. Not anymore. Not like this. Ava saw the panic rising in him, so she reached for his hand beneath the table. Her touch grounded him. "It's okay," she whispered. "I'm here. If you believe hope still finds us even in the places we ran from, comment, amen. Let this section glow with warmth. Someone scrolling right now might need that tiny spark of belief." Eli swallowed hard. "I need some air." Before anyone could stop him, he turned and walked out of the room. Ava followed immediately, her footsteps echoing his. She knew, once his path cracked open, everything else would come rushing through, and the storm was only beginning. Eli pushed through the double doors and stepped outside, the cold night air hitting him like a wave. He braced both hands on the railing at the top of the steps, head bowed, chest rising and falling in sharp, uneven breaths. The quiet campus felt too loud, too open, too full of eyes that suddenly saw him in ways he'd spent years avoiding. Ava hurried after him, slowing only when she reached his side. Eli, wait. He didn't lift his head. I didn't want this. I know. They weren't supposed to know who I was. She placed a careful hand on his back. But they do now, and that doesn't make you any less human. Eli let out a laugh, broken, bitter. Human? Ava. I've been a ghost for years. A name people whispered about. Whatever happened to discussion topic at academic dinners. The kind of person professors use to scare students. Don't burn out like Elias Turner. Don't disappear like him. He swallowed hard. Tonight, I stopped being invisible. And I'm not sure I know how to be anything else. Ava moved closer, her voice soft but sure. You don't have to be what you were, but you do deserve to be seen for who you are now. He closed his eyes, but tears still slipped through. Who I am now? I mop floors. I unclog sinks. I fix benches. And I stay out of the way. You survived grief, she corrected gently. You survived pressure no one should face alone. You survived losing someone you loved. That doesn't make you less. It makes you stronger. He shook his head, unable to accept her kindness without feeling it burn. Suddenly, the building door swung open again. Dr. Molina stepped outside, her expression calm but urgent. Mr. Turner, may we speak? Eli tensed, but Ava squeezed his arm gently in reassurance. Dr. Molina approached slowly, hands tucked into her coat pockets. You don't owe us explanations, she said softly. But I want you to know something. We weren't shocked because you're a janitor. We were shocked because brilliance walked among us quietly, hurting, and we never saw it. Eli looked away. She continued, voice thick with sincerity. Whatever you think you ruined, whatever you think you lost, it doesn't erase the work you've done, or the heart behind it. Eli's throat tightened. She meant well, too well. It hurt to hear compassion from someone who didn't know the whole story. Ava stepped in. Dr. Molina, maybe this isn't the time. The professor nodded gently. You're right. But Eli, if you ever want a place to return to, you have one. She placed a small card in his hand. No pressure. Just an open door. He stared at the card like it weighed more than stone. Hope always felt heavier than despair. Dr. Molina left quietly. Ava turned back to him. You okay? No, he whispered. Ava, I can't go back to that world. Everyone thinks I ran because of ambition burnout. But the truth, they wouldn't forgive me. What truth? She asked softly. Eli took a shaky breath, shoulders trembling. Daniel didn't just collapse. He didn't just fade. He was alone when it happened. Because I left him to defend my thesis presentation. I wasn't there. And his voice cracked violently, cutting the sentence short. Ava's face softened with heartbreak. She gently cupped his cheek. Eli, you were one person. You couldn't be in two places at once. It wasn't your fault. It was, he choked out. I made him feel like he had to keep up with me, like his worth depended on it. The pressure consumed him, and I was too blinded by my dreams to see it. A tear hit the back of Ava's hand. And another. She didn't wipe them away. She let him feel them. Eli, Daniel wouldn't want you to die with him, she whispered. He collapsed into a shaky breath, one hand covering his eyes. The kind of breath people only take when years of guilt are finally cracking open. Ava knelt so she could look directly at him. Listen to me carefully. You deserve to breathe again. You deserve a new beginning. And you don't have to take it alone. He trembled. I'm scared. So am I, she admitted. But good things are always a little scary. He looked at her, really looked, and something fragile flickered in his eyes. Not joy, not peace, but possibility. She reached for his hand. Come with me. Wherever the rest of the story goes, let me be in it with you. He inhaled shakily, her words settling into the cracks of his broken places. A soft breeze swept through the courtyard. Above them, the moon broke through the clouds, casting pale silver light across the steps. It felt like something was shifting, subtle but undeniable. If this story touched you, don't scroll past quietly. Tap like, not for me, but for the man carrying the weight of a past he never deserved. One click is your way of saying, I see him. I feel him. He's not alone. Ava brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. Eli, what do you want to do now? He stared at the math building behind them, the place that once held everything he was and everything he lost. Then he looked at her. I don't know, he said honestly, but I think I'm ready to try. Ava smiled softly. Then let's take the first step together. And just as Eli stood, a voice called sharply from behind them. Not Aldridge, not a professor. Someone Eli hadn't heard from in years. Elias Turner? Eli froze. The storm wasn't over. It had just opened its next chapter. Eli turned slowly, every muscle in his body tightening as if bracing for impact. Ava stepped instinctively closer to him, her hand hovering near his arm in silent support. From the shadows beside the old library, a man stepped forward, mid-40s, sharp features softened by exhaustion, a familiar shape in his shoulders, a familiar tension in his jaw. Eli's breath caught. Dr. Rowan? He whispered. Ava blinked. You know him? Eli nodded faintly, stunned. He was Daniel's therapist, and a close family friend. Dr. Rowan approached with careful steps, as if nearing a wounded animal. Elias, I didn't expect to find you here, but someone sent me a link to a post circulating online. He lifted his phone slightly. Your work on the board. I recognize your hand immediately. Eli's stomach twisted. This isn't... I didn't want... I know, Dr. Rowan said gently. You never wanted attention. You never wanted your name back in the world. He paused, eyes softening. But maybe you needed it. Eli shook his head. You don't understand. I don't deserve to be here. I don't deserve... Elias, Rowan interrupted quietly. You've been punishing yourself for a tragedy you didn't cause. Ava squeezed Eli's hand. I've been telling him that. Rowan exhaled and continued, voice steady but aching with old memory. Your brother didn't break because of you. Daniel struggled silently for a long time. He hid things. He carried pressures none of us saw. The night he collapsed, it wasn't your absence that hurt him. Eli's breath hitched. Then what was it? His belief, Rowan said softly, that he had to be perfect to be loved. The words cut sharper than any accusation ever could. Rowan stepped closer. He admired you, Eli. He wanted to impress you, not because you demanded it, but because you inspired him. His struggle was deeper, more internal than you ever knew. And after he passed, Rowan's voice cracked briefly. You rewrote the story in your mind to make yourself the villain, because villains have clarity. Guilt has structure. Grief doesn't. Eli staggered back a step, tears slipping freely now. I should have seen it. I should have... No, Rowan said firmly. You should have been allowed to be his brother, not his guardian. You were young too. You were allowed mistakes. You were allowed to live. Ava wiped her own tears, her voice trembling as she whispered. Eli, listen to him. Rowan placed a gentle hand on Eli's shoulder. Daniel didn't want you to disappear. He didn't want your mind to dim out of guilt. He didn't want you to spend years hiding behind a mop and a uniform as punishment. His voice softened. His love for you was never conditional on your achievements or presence. It was constant, messy, human. Eli inhaled sharply, a broken, breathless sound that carried years of sorrow. Rowan continued. Tonight, the world saw a glimpse of who you are, not the prodigy, not the janitor, but the man who survived the worst day of his life and still carries kindness in everything he touches. Ava smiled through tears. The man who fixed a bench. The man who helped someone pick up their notes. The man who solved an impossible equation and tried to erase proof of it. Eli looked between them. Rowan, the last thread of his past, and Ava, the first spark of his future. The weight on his chest shifted, not gone, but lighter somehow, held together by hands he never expected to find. A silence settled, quiet, thick, healing. Then Rowan said, You don't have to return to academia. You don't have to prove anything. But you also don't have to hide anymore. Ava leaned into him gently. Your road doesn't have to be the same as before. It just has to be real. Eli's lips trembled into a fragile, trembling smile. I don't know what tomorrow looks like. None of us do, Ava whispered, but we can walk it together. Have you ever seen someone rise from their lowest moment simply because someone finally held their story with gentleness? If this journey touched you, don't scroll away quietly. Tap like. Not for the plot, not for the writing, but for the soul who survived grief, guilt, and invisibility and still held on to kindness. Let that small gesture be your whisper of, I felt this. Eli turned toward the math building one last time. The place where he once shined. The place he once feared. The place that now held no power over him. He exhaled deeply, releasing a ghost he'd carried too long. Then he looked at Ava and Rowan, at the people beside him, and stepped forward. Not toward the past, not toward hiding, but toward whatever life waited next. And for the first time in years, his heart didn't break at the thought of tomorrow. It hoped. Final moral. Sometimes the smartest minds disappear not because they're weak, but because the world forgets that brilliance doesn't protect a heart from breaking. And sometimes all it takes is one person, one listener, one believer, to remind a wounded soul that their story isn't over. Healing doesn't ask for perfection, only courage, and someone willing to stand beside you while you find your way back into the light.